I think that a lot of people mistake non-monogamy for orgy in the kitchen every day.
Yeah.
They assume, because sexuality is what seems to make it so different, that they assume that if people have different sexual boundaries than they do, sexual boundaries that include multiple partners, that they must have no boundaries at all.
Yeah.
Which I have found in my research is absolutely not true.
We hope you'll enjoy this episode with Dr. Eli Sheff, sociologist and one of the foremost academic experts on polyamorous families. Today, we talk about what are people Googling about consensual non-monogamy. Google searches have skyrocketed. And so we want to know, what are people Googling? And let's hear the answers from an actual expert in consensual non-monogamy. And then we also talk about Dr. Eli Sheff's academic career and common questions that people have about polyamory. So we're really excited for you to listen to this episode. We hope you'll love it. Welcome to Sexology Lab. Each week, we speak with the most compelling minds in modern sexology to ask the questions shaping the future of desire, connection, and human wellness. Let's dive in. What are the most common mistakes people make when they first try consensual non-monogamy?
I would say one of them is not thinking about how they will feel when their partner has someone else. If they're just thinking, oh, what fun for me, and they're not thinking about, then my partner might go off with someone else, then sometimes they get blindsided by that. And they're like, holy shit, this isn't what I signed up for. This actually feels really uncomfortable. I thought about me having all this fun. And now that you're out with someone else, I'm feeling really threatened and uncomfortable. That's incredibly common. Another one, especially if it's an established female-male couple and they approach polyamory looking for a free-floating bisexual woman who will just kind of add herself into their lives, and their lives won't change that much except now that they've got this fun sex partner. But they have high expectations of her, that she won't have other partners, that she will come to them, that she'll help them raise their kids, that she's kind of an accessory to their lives. And enough people approaching the polyamorous community looking for that polyamorous folks now are really pissed off about that. They are tired of that. They don't want to hear it. They really don't want to participate in that. And they are not interested in reading those dating profiles and things like that. In fact, they label those folks unicorn hunters, because that free-floating woman who's willing to just add herself into someone else's life but doesn't have any other relationships herself, she's so rare as to be mythical, nearly, as to be a unicorn.
Unicorn hunters. Okay, so something that I hear a lot, especially from men, is that I would be okay having a threesome with my wife if the other partner was a girl, but I could never do it if the other partner was a guy. Is that something common that you hear a lot too?
It's really common, and it's unfortunate because it really reinforces homophobia against men and the idea that women's sexuality is for male consumption, that it's fine for women to be together as long as it's performative for male gratification, that the women wouldn't actually be that interested in each other. They're more interested in making him the center of attention and kind of being his accessories. And ironically, in my research, what I found is that when men go in expecting that and go into a threesome expecting that, at least for folks who end up in polyamorous relationships, the men are often sadly disappointed that the women tend to be much more interested in each other than in performing for him. At least when it goes well, the women get along great, especially if he orgasmed right away and the women are like, all right, whatever, dude, we're busy with each other. And he's like, oh, but wait, I was going to be the center of attention. How about me over here? In fact, so many men used this phrase that I used it as a chapter title, not all that they would have these really, really high expectations of a threesome going in.
Yeah.
And then they'd realize, I'm not this porn star god I thought I was. Or sure, that happens in pornography, but that is acting. That is not real life.
That is
And when you
acting.
expect that out of your own sex life, you will be disappointed if you use pornography as the litmus of this is what I should be expecting to happen. And so generally what happens in those situations is that either the men deal with their insecurities face up to that and get over it and become more flexible.
Yeah.
Or they gravitate towards swinging instead, because swinging is heterosexual sex. So there's not this expectation. Sometimes there's not even the allowance of male on male sexuality. They might even have signs posted literally saying the rules are no men together in some of the swinging clubs in the United
Yeah.
States. I've seen that because, again, homophobia against men is hardcore. And the flip side of that is that women's sexuality is for men and a performance for men. And so women don't like that. Lesbians and bisexual women don't like that debasing, objectifying approach. And men who are bisexual or gay don't like that either. So the heterosexual men that want to be that porn star god with multiple women fawning on them, if that's really what you want, then pay a professional. If what you want is an object to serve you, then that's a transactional relationship and you should pay a professional. Not expect someone to give you that for free if you're not willing to be fair and equal in that transaction.
So you have been researching consensual non-monogamies for more than 25 years. What has changed the most in the field academically since you began?
I would say that the study of consensual non-monogamies has just exploded. When I started in the mid-90s, 1996 was when I started my study, there had been earlier research in the 70s especially, and to some extent in the 1980s, about swinging. People had researched that in kind of group marriages and open relationships. And then the HIV pandemic really shut that down. People got all kinds of freaked out about multiple partner sex. Not that they stopped having it, but that it went much more underground. Polyamory already existed. It was already a thing, but not that many people knew about it. People weren't necessarily talking about it nearly as much. And as a sociologist, I had expected some extent of support from my discipline because in the past, sociology had looked at the kind of edges of society to see what was happening. And unfortunately, in the 1990s and into the early 2000s, the discipline of sociology took a hard right turn to looking primarily at either incarceration and the prison system or the medical industrial complex, and looking much more at these large institutions than these more rule-breaking people on the edges.
Yeah.
And that's what really interests me. I am not interested in the rule makers and the rule followers and the rule enforcers. I'm much more interested in what are the people on the fringes doing and how are they existing within this structure that's not built for them, but they are trying to carve lives that don't necessarily fit within this mainstream or conventional. And so, of course, polyamory was fascinating to me. Sociology still hasn't embraced it. I would say that the most exciting research in academia is coming out of psychology as a discipline has really gone whole hog into understanding polyamory and consensual non-monogamies and has worked hard to destigmatize that, because in the past there has been an assumption that anything other than monogamy is pathological and it's always lumped under cheating. And for a lot of couples counselors or marriage and family therapists, what they were trained in graduate school was you have to shut that down first and then fix the relationship so they can return to monogamy. And that in the 90s and the early 2000s, that was so damaging to polyamorous folks and to people who were in consensually non-monogamous relationships. And now there's at least an awareness. I wouldn't say that every single therapist has jumped on the bandwagon of open relationships can be healthy, but out of any discipline, I would say psychology has done the most in terms of in-depth research and understanding the relationships. They've done a lot on relationship satisfaction research.
But you didn't know what you didn't know then, right?
Exactly. Exactly. And I was really the first researcher in the United States. When I started researching, there were really only 3 of us worldwide. It was me in the US, it was Meg Barker, who is now Meg John Barker in England, and Maria Pilata Chiaroli in Australia. And that was it.
Wow.
And now hundreds of researchers
Mhm.
worldwide. It's very exciting to see the field just blossom.
Sexual Health Alliance is so fortunate to have you as the director of our Consensual Non-Monogamy Advanced Certification, because that's where professionals are going to specialize in this. That's really important for them so they can help teach other professionals and they can have this knowledge to share with their clients so they don't come into the therapy room and try to just shut it down when they have clients who are into consensual non-monogamy or polyamorous.
Absolutely. And I really appreciate the Sexual Health Alliance for their sex positive approach to mental health. And it's non stigmatizing and it's will lead the lives that they actually have rather than shaming them for not leading a more conventional life or fitting into a much smaller box. I really appreciate the way that the Sexual Health Alliance supports health in diversity.
Yeah.
And in a sex positive way, I feel like that's really important. So I'm grateful to be working with Shaw.
I love hearing that. Thank you. All right. Now I want to talk about families. And so your work on polyamorous families with children is especially influential. So, what have your findings revealed that most directly challenges dominant assumptions about family and structure?
I would say the biggest challenge or the biggest myth busting thing is that there's this assumption in mainstream society that these kids must be a hot mess. They must be really confused. They must be feeling abandoned. They must have a new dad every month or something. And
Yeah.
that is abundantly not the case. My research has really found that these kids are in great shape. They are,
Yeah.
for one, having stability in their home life. It's not this new dad every month that some people seem to expect. In fact, some of the polyamorous relationships that I've studied have lasted 60 years or more,
Wow.
multiple decades.
Wow.
The other thing is that even if the romantic and or sexual element of the relationship isn't working anymore, that polyamorous folks are amazing at developing emotional relationships that can sustain across time and that don't rely on sexuality as the glue that holds them together. And that is so important that I had to make up a new word to describe that idea of the emotional connections being primary over the sexual connections. And that's something polyamorous folks do a lot. They make up words that describe their lives and experiences because conventional English doesn't have words for the opposite of jealousy. We understand jealousy, of course, but how about being happy when you see your partner smooching with someone else instead of being jealous? So they made up the word compersion for
Yes.
that. So I was like, oh, that's such a good idea, making up words. I'm
Yeah.
making up a word too. I made up the word polyaffective to describe the non sexual relationships among polyamorous people that tend to be the actual glue that holds a polyamorous family together.
Yeah.
And when the polyaffective relationships are strong, then those relationships last and last, regardless of what happens with the sexuality. And for some polyamorous people, they'll have a sexual relationship for a while, then it'll be non sexual, then it'll be sexual again, or vice versa. It'll be non sexual for a long time with some sex. They're able to have a lot of resilience because they can flex with ongoing changes. Whereas monogamy or the expectation of not only sexual exclusivity, but sexuality as the glue that holds people together is clearly not working
Yeah.
for a lot of people. It absolutely works great for some people. But if sex is the only thing holding you together, then
Mhm.
you will be sadly disappointed when gravity takes over decades later. People don't look the same. Their sexuality might drop away. If what you're relying on is physical attraction to keep the relationship going, then what happens when your partner gets wrinkles or gains weight or
Mhm.
goes through menopause or can't get an erection as easily as they used to in their 20s? These are
Yeah.
all things, if you live long enough, you can expect that kind of thing to happen. So the polyamorous families have this level of resilience that really stands out to me, the way the adults can make commitments to each other that are not predicated on sexual access to each other, that they are committing to being there as a unit for the children regardless of what happens with them romantically. I love that. I think that
Yeah.
is an ideal way to raise children because sexuality comes and goes. So, this biased assumption that all polyamorous families are really fragile and will fall
Mm,
apart is abundantly not accurate. That
yeah.
a lot of polyamorous families, maybe they change forms, maybe they change who's living together or how people are interacting, but that level of resilience beyond, all right, if we're not having sex anymore, then we're just done with each other, that provides continuity that proves really advantageous for the kids. I would say another thing that's super advantageous for kids coming out of polyamorous relationships or kids coming out of polyamorous families where the adults have polyamorous relationships. They're coming out of these families that spend a lot of time and effort learning how to relate, learning how to negotiate, learning how to have emotional conversations, learning how to deal with conflict,
Yeah.
learning how to identify their own needs and talk to each other if they're feeling uncomfortable about
Yeah.
something. So these kids come out of these families with tremendous ability to have this emotional continuity or emotional intelligence that really sets them up for resilient relationships
Mm.
later in life. That, for instance, the kids in my study talk about being able to go to college and move away from their family to a place they've never been before, to a place where they don't know anyone, and being able to reestablish a network of caring individuals, like a
Mhm.
safety net
Yeah.
of social support. And that is a huge skill and
Yeah.
a very important lifelong skill that these kids are learning from their families of origin that I see as perhaps the most valuable thing a polyamorous family teaches its children. And originally, when I first started studying and talking to the kids, especially, I asked a lot about, do you miss your parents' previous partners? Are there people you
Yeah.
miss? Have you experienced a lot of loss in your life with people leaving and things like that? And finally, one kid said to me, you ask about that a lot. You are obsessed with that. That's not
Right. Like,
coming
what's
from
your
us.
deal? Yeah.
Exactly. Like
Yeah. Yeah.
you are bringing that as an expectation to this.
Yeah.
That's not coming from us. And that kid explained it, I thought, really well. Like, yeah, people leave all the time, but not just parents, partners. They were explaining how, for instance, they had a best friend that they met in kindergarten and all the way into high school. They were best friends. And then that child's parent got relocated, got a job
Yeah.
all the way across the country. So that kid, midway through freshman year of high school, had to move. And that
Mhm.
child was way more devastated by the loss of that friend moving away. And that was early enough in social media that I think they had found each other on MySpace, which
MySpace. I remember
was a
MySpace.
thing. Yeah, it
Yeah.
used to be a thing. And I'm sure now they're Instagram friends or something like that. But
Right.
so they were able to stay in touch, but they weren't able to see each other every day at school and hang out on the weekends and things like that. That kid also brought up that their grandmother died.
Mm.
They had loved their grandmother and spent a lot of time with their grandmother. And when she died, that was really devastating for them. So, yes, they had experienced loss, but these other losses that really anyone can experience were much more impactful for them than parents' partners, in part because the kids in polyamorous families don't come to assume, oh, if you're dating my mom or dating my dad, then that means you're my parent. The kids are not looking at them
Mm.
that way. The kids think, oh, if you're dating one of my parents, then you're my parent's sweetie. And when the kids do come to see them as parents, it's only under three circumstances. One, that they meet when the child is quite young, like single digits in age. Two, that that person sticks around for decades, like they are a long-term feature in that
Yeah.
child's life. And three, that they cohabitate. They live together and they take care of them. They're somebody who's making them breakfast. There's somebody who's
Yeah.
picking them up after soccer practice. Things like that. That's when, over those decades, yes, they do take on a parental role. But far more frequently, the children from polyamorous families are viewing their parents' partners as an auntie or an uncle figure or
Yeah.
a friend
Yeah.
of the family, someone who's not a parent necessarily,
Mhm.
but a trusted adult that they could rely on if they need to talk to somebody, if they need to be picked up, if they need help and don't necessarily want to talk to their parent about it, but they do want to talk to an adult who's available and trustworthy and supportive. That's great for kids to
Yeah.
have more support than just their parents.
Are you curious about sexology? Do you want to further integrate sexology into your work or your life? Well, friends, then we've got something just for you. It's called the Sexology Practice Guide, and it walks you through the ways this shows up in your work, in your life, and guides you through working within your scope, incorporating intimacy and sexual health into your work without starting over. Download this short, practical guide at sexologylab.com/guide. That's sexologylab.com/guide. And while you're here, make sure to subscribe and share. And now, back to the show. And so all of this sounds so positive, like positive findings, positive outcomes. So why do you think some people in society start to freak out a little bit when they hear about kids in polyamorous families?
I think that a lot of people mistake non-monogamy for orgy in the kitchen every day.
Yeah.
They assume, because sexuality is what seems to make it so different, that they assume that if people have different sexual boundaries than they do, sexual boundaries that include multiple partners, that they must have no boundaries at all.
Yeah.
Which I have found in my research is absolutely not true. That these parents, when they do have adult time, it's behind closed doors.
Yeah.
It's when the kids are asleep. It's when the kids are out at spending the weekend at grandma's house or something.
Right.
They are having appropriate adult boundaries. They're not having sex with or in front of their children.
Yeah.
In my sample, I have not found any of that. Granted, my sample is small. It's about 200 people. They're the folks who were not only early adopters, meaning they were already at it in the mid-90s, and they're still talking to me about it 30 years later. So they're the folks who really took polyamory on, and it's really been working for them. So I wouldn't say 100% that every single polyamorous family is always emotionally functional or super communicative or 100% ideal for their kids. I would say that polyamorous families obviously have disadvantages and face similar issues that other families face. But very importantly, they don't face any special disadvantages that are only happening to polyamorous families. Like, they face family disadvantages. So people leaving, for instance, happens when they get divorced, when somebody dies, when people relocate, having to share space, or experiencing stigma as a family. That's happened to all kinds of families. Like, divorce used to be a really big deal, and now it's just kind of a big nothing. Like, people get divorced, and it's not the stigma that it used to be. Interracial families, oh my God, that used to be such a big deal.
Yeah.
And now it's quite common. It's really not a big deal anymore. So any kind of disadvantage that faces polyamorous families is a family disadvantage. It faces other families too. But they do have, ironically, an advantage that other families do not, in that if they are an existing family and one of the parents falls in love with someone else, in a monogamous family, that parent either has to stuff that down, which that becomes anybody who's tried to stuff something big down over time realizes that takes a lot of effort and often leads to things like alcoholism, drug addiction, or resentment, poisonous resentment, poisoning the relationship and the family as a whole. Or they cheat, or they break up. And those are kind of the three choices in monogamy. But in a polyamorous family, you can have a parent fall in love with someone else, and it doesn't have to break up the family. They don't have to stuff it down and become an alcoholic to deal with their repression, and they don't have to cheat. So no special disadvantages, but one special advantage.
I love that so much. All right. Well, I want to close things out with you with a lightning round. Is polyamory actually becoming more common, or is is it just more visible in culture and media right now?
Both.
Both. Okay, that's a good answer. Do shows and movies make polyamory look sexier, messier, or more chaotic than it really is?
Yes, I would say that a lot of polyamorous families, rather than the orgy in the kitchen all the time, they're much more likely to be like making dinner and helping the kids with homework and folding laundry. That's real polyamorous family life. And then having sex at night or whatever once the kids are asleep. It's not like they never have sex, but they're not constantly having an orgy in the kitchen that the kids get home from school and they're like, orgy again.
Is there one portrayal in pop culture of non monogamy that makes you think, oh, that's going to confuse everyone?
You brought up sister wives earlier, and I would say that while that is accurate for that kind of relationship, that it makes people confused in that it looks like it's all about the man having multiple partners and the women don't have them, and it's all about heterosexuality. It's this religiously focused thing, and I would say that is by far the minority of people having multiple partner relationships, that it's much more common for people, if one person in a relationship has access to other partners, then everyone else does as well. And that they're much more embedded in daily social life and not living separated in a compound in the desert. And that the women have as much choice and control as anyone of any other gender.
If you had to name just one book that changed your life, what would it be?
I would say when I was in high school, I read this book, A Door into Ocean, which is an old sci-fi book by, boy, I can't remember her first name right now. Her last name is quite a mouthful, Slonczewski. It portrays a much more collective society. The people in that society call each other sharers, and it's a much more gentle collective than could ever happen under a capitalist patriarchal regime. The writing, I've looked back at it since then, and it's got that kind of older sci-fi tone to it, but really a delightful book, A Door into Ocean.
Cool. I'm going to have to check it out. All right. What's a sexy place you want to travel to?
I love Thailand. I have a sister who lives in Thailand, and a couple years ago I spent 6 months with her. It's very interesting in that on one level, the culture is quite conservative for the Thai people. A lot of, especially Thai women, are very personally conservative and cover themselves up quite a bit. But the sexuality for tourists is much more diverse and open than it is in the United States. For some people, that means sex tourism that is exploitative, which is not great. But for other people, it means an openness to sexuality being much less of a big deal, like not nearly as fraught with puritanical judgment in Thailand as it is in the US. And I've got a special place in my heart for Thailand. I love that place.
What is your favorite way to relax after a long day?
I gotta say, bathtub, glass of wine, book. Either that or taking a walk. I live near a river and I love to walk along the water.
If you could leave one message for the next generation about relationships, intimacy, or sexual health, what would that message be and why does it matter?
You can be however and whoever you want, as long as you are choosing consenting folks to interact with and you feel okay about it, then let go of shame. Shame is poisonous and leads to judgment of other people. If they're not just like you, then they seem very frightening and very negative. They're dangerous. And people don't have to all be the same. It's totally fine for you to have your sexuality or your relationship one way and for other people to be different. And you can just allow that. You don't have to get all upset about it. You don't have to be exactly like them, and they don't have to be like you. We can all, in fact, calm down about each other's gender expression, sexuality, whatever, and just be ourselves without shame and allow other people to be themselves without shame or judgment, and everyone would be so much happier. Just minding our own business, not taking on the negativity from society about sexuality, gender expression, relationships, and not putting it onto other people.
Yeah, what a great message. Thank you so much for being with us today, Dr. Eli Sheff.
Thanks so much for having me, Michelle.
All right. Thanks for listening, everyone. Bye. The Sexology Lab is powered by Sexual Health Alliance, the global leader in education and certification for sexology professionals. Since 2015, Shaw has trained thousands of therapists, coaches, educators, and healthcare professionals through industry-leading certification programs and events. Learn directly from the experts, participate in immersive learning experiences, and join the most connected global community in sexology. Learn more at sexualhealthalliance.com. Don't forget to subscribe on YouTube, Spotify, Apple, or wherever you listen. Links are in the description below.